Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film Pain and Gain. A group of three bodybuilders led by Daniel Lugo, who's played by Mark Wahlberg, who go and kidnap a very rich man and steal basically all of his assets and money after kidnapping him and torturing him for several days because they don't have a lot of money, they're just bodybuilders and they want to improve their lives. And by kidnapping this guy, Victor Crenshaw, played by Tony Shalhoub, and stealing all his money, they feel that they can get on the right track in life and do a lot better and kind of live the American dream, I guess. This is the latest film from Michael Bay. It's kind of his return to the smaller budgeted movie. It's, I think, smaller budgeted than Bad Boys, and it certainly has the least amount of explosions of any Michael Bay film I've ever seen. At the beginning, I think this film is really engaging because you're following Daniel Lugo and you're hearing this narration given by Mark Wahlberg and you're really following this character. If the whole film had been following Daniel Lugo and really about his character rather than telling the story of everything that happened, because this is based on a true story, it feels like Michael Bay's too interested in telling you everything that happened, and so you have like too many scenes and too many details when it really should have just been about Daniel Lugo. And they kind of switch perspectives. It switches to The Rock's character, Paul Doyle, and then it also switches to Anthony Mackie's perspective, and it kind of switches between a bunch of perspectives, and it loses its focus. I mean, at the beginning it felt very focused, and it even made his crazy stylized kind of director point of view have a little more of a point to it. It seemed like he knew what he was doing almost. As most Michael Bay films, the style overtook it. Or I think like a lot of Michael Bay films, he just takes on way too much. You know, it should be a simpler idea. This should be a simple kind of movie. Most directors would not complicate it as much as Michael Bay does, but he's like too ambitious and far too ambitious for his own good, and it's a real fault for him. The way he's trying to tell it, at least, reminds me of Goodfellas. Goodfellas, there's a story and there's a storyteller with Martin Scorsese, and this film is just about the story and making sure you know all these erroneous details. But if it had just been about Daniel Lugo and we had not known certain information, like in Goodfellas, you don't know absolutely everything. And I felt in Pain and Gain, I knew too many little intricacies that I didn't really need to know necessarily. I mean, there's a whole court scene at the end that I don't really understand, like, what the point of that really was. It was just like, well, there was a trial and we should show it. You know, they're already caught. What was the point? He's not interested in really being a storyteller. He's interested in the story, and that's kind of a major fault with a lot of directors, is like they're not thinking about how they can tell this in a unique way. They're thinking about how they can tell this true story, and that's such a bad instinct because narrative film and, you know, major Hollywood motion picture isn't a documentary, and even in documentaries you cut things out because they're not working with the theme and how you're telling the story, and Michael Bay doesn't really get that. Now, this is a lot shorter than most of his recent films, thankfully, and a lot more tolerable, but he doesn't really understand how to tell the story. He seems to really like the story and like the characters, but he's like a little too in love with the story, and I wish he had been more in love with the characters. And Michael Bay hasn't focused on character in like forever. You know, he's been dealing with giant robots and Shia LaBeouf. He wanted to go back and wanted to see if he could do something simpler, and he's a lot better of a director at this than he is with Transformers, but he still feels kind of a little out of his element. If this film had been with more explosions, I think it maybe would have worked for him and he would have been able to kind of hide the flaws he has. I mean, that didn't really work for the Transformers movies, but that's just how I felt when I was watching it. This film just felt like it was like trudging on because he's just doing way too much. He's so hyperactive. I feel like he is on cocaine when he's doing these movies because he's just like not able to focus on anything. He has to do constant cutting and even like using like video cameras for reasons I don't really understand. He has to keep it always moving and pumping and going, and at the beginning he like moves and it really gets you into a lot of the exposition rather quickly and really effectively. I really like the beginning of the film because it really goes and it moves. You get to the real meat of the story very quickly. He doesn't know exactly how to use his own style that well. You think someone like this would keep it a simple idea and have it move fast, and I think that'd be a cool way to do a movie. He has some good instincts, but then he is too jittery and too insecure in his own direction that he's moving jumping all over the place. And you can tell he's insecure in his direction, that he would do something like Pain and Gain. I mean, what's the point of him doing this? You know, I know he didn't want to just do Transformers movies, but this doesn't feel really like Michael Bay. Even if you like Michael Bay, you don't want to see Michael Bay do kind of a smaller movie. You want to see him do a big movie with big explosions. That's what he's known for. In a way, I guess this is better directed than I've seen from him in a while, but it's still very flawed. It's still a total mess. He's actually pretty good with the actors. I think The Rock gave a great performance in this movie. You know, he's really funny. His character at first is really obsessed with Jesus. He's found himself, he's like born again, and then he finds cocaine again. The Rock was just really great at that. I mean, he played it in a more comedic way, which a lot of the comedy in Michael Bay movies is just awful. And so that he's trying to make a comedy. The comedy in this movie was just kind of mean and insulting and just not very funny. It's very gross out and obvious and just boring. The Rock's the only really fun thing about this movie. Mark Wahlberg as Daniel Lugo, you know, you really do want to follow him. At the beginning when he's going through his narration and everything, I really got into the character of Daniel Lugo. Mark Wahlberg played it as a very charming know-it-all buffoon. These are probably some of the best performances I've seen from a Michael Bay movie since like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence or something. I mean, not that the acting in Michael Bay movies are really good, but I was surprised that, you know, he got some actually decent performances out of this movie. But it's still like not a great movie. It really trudges along. It's actually kind of short for a Michael Bay movie, but it still felt way too long. I mean, he really needs to think about making simple genre pieces and just having like a lot of cool explosions and set pieces. He's kind of a big, dumb, stupid director, and he should embrace that. And it feels like he's fighting it with this movie. I feel like he doesn't embrace his best instincts, and so we always get these kind of convoluted, complicated messes of movies that just ultimately aren't very good. And Pain and Gain follows in that vein. If you're a very stylized director, you can't suddenly want substance and then over stylize the substance to kind of give it more substance with style. It shows the mess that Michael Bay's direction really is. So if you have seen Pain and Gain and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.